The Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts, IDFA, is a proud sponsor of Purse Strings. IDFA is the premier organization dedicated to the certification, education, and promotion of the use of financial professionals in the divorce arena. IDFA provides specialized training to accounting, financial, and legal professionals in the field of pre-divorce financial planning. To find out more about earning the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation, visit institutedfa.com.
Coming up on today's edition of Women and Money, the shit we don't talk about, our guest is Michelle Lawless.
I can't wait to talk with Michelle today about all things divorce. Michelle has her own firm, Michelle Lawless Family Law. We are going to dig in and learn from Michelle's years of experience of litigating divorce, her expertise on how women can help themselves before shit hits the fan. This episode will really focus in on why money is such a critical topic for women to know about when in a relationship.
Well, you know Michelle, she tells it like it is, so she's seen a lot over her years, and her stories just make us shake our heads.
I'm ready. Let's dig in.
Gloria Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women and Money, the shit we don't talk about.
So, this topic of divorce will really focus on the impacts when women are not tuned in to what's happening in their household financially.
Welcome, Michelle. We are so glad to have you on to discuss about the shit we don't talk about, because these are literally the things women are not talking about. Before we dive in, could we get a little introduction about you?
Hi, ladies. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. This is a topic close to my heart, just given my 20 plus years in the divorce field. I literally think I can say that I've seen it all. Of course, when I say that, something happens and I say, oh my gosh, here's something I haven't seen before. But yes, I've been a practicing family law attorney for over 20 years. I have my own firm, and what I really enjoy helping people with today is navigating, the difficult situation of divorce outside of the court process and providing some creative solutions, both through mediation and collaborative law, to help really do a customized approach to divorce and really working with people to negotiate an agreement and save on that. It's not only financial cost, it's also the emotional cost of hefty litigation.
Yeah, that's for sure. Divorce has many, many costs to it, not all financial, emotional,
right.
And time and all of that. So let's jump in and let's just start with Michelle. When women come to you because they're in that divorce process, they've been served, or they're even thinking about serving divorce, how do you start to address the topic of finances with her?
So the thing that I do in every consultation is I try to break down the issues in kind of what I call distinct buckets of every divorce case. And something that I think a lot of people need to know right off the top, as far as the legal aspect of a divorce goes, is that divorce is state-based. So if you have a sister or a best friend that got divorced in California or Indiana or Pennsylvania, their laws may not translate to your state. I'm here in Illinois, and lawyers that practice in family law very often, not always, I mean, there are some people that practice nationally, but most of the time you are predominantly in one state. And that is because unlike federal like tax law or, other areas of law, we negotiate our cases based upon state law. So I walk through in my consultation the 5 kind of financial aspects of a divorce case, which in Illinois are going to be property settlement, spousal support, and then everything relating to the children, child support, children's expenses, college. Not all issues are the same in all states, which is why I said that at the very beginning. But I try to break it into those buckets because I think that's like easy to start understanding where things fit in.
Good to know. I like those 5 buckets. It breaks it down a little bit more understandably. So when women start talking about their financials, what are some of the most common mistakes or maybe assumptions that you see women making as they start to have these divorce conversations?
Well, I think maybe the biggest one that is maybe the biggest cause, not of concern, but sometimes concern, I don't know, I don't know what the right word is. It's a red flag for me is when someone says, I know nothing. He handled everything. I may have access to a credit card. I may have access to a checking account. I don't have online access. He's tried to give me online access. I don't know what the password is. Those are, when I start hearing things like that, I start thinking, okay, we're going to have to do some work. We're going to have to do some work educating and investigating, because what I think clients come to learn quickly is if they don't know, they can't educate me. So I have to both investigate and then educate them, because I can't advise them or negotiate a settlement on their behalf if I don't know. So you can kind of immediately see there, if someone comes to me and they know their income, they know their expenses, they know their balance sheet, you can see how immediately I can take that information that is immediately reliable and start giving them pretty good, somewhat, detailed advice if they are confident what they're bringing to me is accurate. If it's the first situation, we're going to have to do a little bit more work. That costs a little bit more money, and it's going to take a little bit longer.
So do you have to help her and walk her through what to find and what to look for and how to get all that? Like, do you do that for her, or do you just send her with a list of to-dos, or how does she go about finding all that information if she's never really engaged?
So it depends. We'll start with, what do you know? Who has the information? Do you have an accountant? That's kind of one question. A lot of times the answer is yes, but my husband hired him or her. I don't know them, but I know who they are. Like I have a tax return. I can see the name. So, and a lot of times in a mediated case or a collaborative case, I will have an attorney on the other side who can help funnel me information as needed. So if it's a situation that is relatively amicable in terms of getting me information that I need, we can kind of look to different sources in order to gather that information. Now, I'll talk briefly about if there is no communication from the other side, or if it's not an amicable case, what the lawyer would need to do is start issuing subpoenas. We all know what that word is. It's compelling a third party to provide information. So you don't have to just issue a subpoena on a person. You can issue a subpoena on a bank, on a financial institution. You issue subpoenas on employers to get employment records. You can issue subpoenas on a number of different entities. You can even issue a subpoena to an accountant. I would not recommend that as a first step. A lot of times accountants, other people in professional service industries will voluntarily funnel information. No one likes receiving a subpoena. It's expensive. It adds costs and it adds delay, because when you are issuing a subpoena, technically it's a court order. A subpoena is a court order to a third party to produce documents and or testimony. And they have to certify that everything that they're tendering is accurate, it is complete, and it is in compliance with the subpoena. So if you are going to serve a subpoena on an accountant, you can bet they are going to take their time and they are going to make sure every I is dotted and T is crossed. If you say to them, I'm looking for the last 3 years of tax returns as a starting point, but you haven't issued a subpoena, very often they will give that to you. And they don't have to go through their compliance department. They're not signing off on like some affidavit of compliance. So you can kind of see how fees and time start to creep up when you have to do things more formally, as opposed to me being able to call the lawyer on the other side and say, I need access to the tax returns. They tell their client, can you have the accountant send it? And it gets over in a matter of 24 to 48 hours versus drafting a subpoena.
Yeah.
It's got to be served a certain way. And they're going to take time, to make sure they're complying. But there are ways to do it.
Yeah.
It just really all depends upon how easy it is to get the information. Sorry, that was a really long answer to you.
No, I mean, that's important. I did not know that about subpoenas, that you could subpoena different institutions and things like that. And that it does.
For documents. Yeah.
Drags down and makes it more expensive. So, the better prepared you are, the better off probably you would be. But so what happens when you have women who come in and say, I don't really know, and then finally you unveil what you learn based on all your investigation? And I know you had some stories that you shared with us, and they were not very happy ones. Can you share one or two about experiences you've had with women when they really didn't understand the financials in their household?
Yeah, as a general matter, I think what it most of the time boils down to is you start receiving information, and it can be in a lot of different forms. You can find out, like you could do a title search on a piece of property and find out that maybe there's a lien attached to it that someone didn't know. And that could be in the form of a tax lien. Maybe property taxes hadn't been paid in a number of years. You want to find out that early. You don't want to find that out when you have decided that you're going to sell your house pursuant to a divorce, and you've decided you estimate a certain number of amount of net proceeds will be split, or you're going to refinance and one party is going to receive the equity in the home. But guess what? You can't really do anything if there's a tax lien until there's a plan to get that tax lien paid off. So the county, usually that's the taxing authority, the city or the county, the state, they are going to require that tax lien be paid anytime something is financially done. So if you're going to sell the property and you've got like $70,000 to $80,000 of unpaid real estate taxes on your property, they're getting that first $70,000 to $80,000. So if the parties thought, well, we've got, $150,000 to divide between us, you don't. And that's not a fun surprise to get in the, in a case. Or if someone, is a business owner and maybe they haven't paid taxes properly throughout the marriage, and there's a huge tax debt. Here's just a tip. If a taxing authority is writing and asking you to get on a payment plan, get on a payment plan, because if you don't, they will just start seizing assets, and there is nothing you can do about it. And that is a really difficult situation when they just start seizing assets. And, I think credit card debt, that's probably a real accessible one for a lot of people. People will find out, I had no idea we had this much credit card debt, because someone can take out, like they can get a credit card in their own name and they can max it out without the other spouse knowing. And it still is considered marital debt if it is used for a marital purpose, such as living expenses. So, a lot of times if people are kind of living high on the hog in an inflated lifestyle, one party may think like, well, we're doing so well. We're taking all these trips, we're buying, we're refurnishing the home, we're, remodeling the home, we're doing all that. It's important to know where that money is coming from.
Yeah.
As simple as that sounds, I think all of this boils down to taking a proactive approach to your finances during your marriage. I think that's where I probably, unfortunately, see 99% of the problems come from one party, whether it's by default, whether it's because, quite honestly, they're just not interested in it, or they're overwhelmed, or actually the more common one is there just is an assumed division of labor in the marriage, and one party is more in tune with day-to-day operations of the household. And one party is in charge of maybe the overall financial planning of the family. And sometimes it's interesting to me, I will find that the payment of the bills and the financial planning, meaning the investments and saving for retirement, they're actually done by different people. And so a woman may have a pretty good handle on the expenses because they're the ones involved in buying the groceries and paying for the children's expenses. They may have a good handle on it, but they may not know how that fits into the overall financial plan for the family.
Right.
Or where is the money coming from to pay the credit card bill?
Right.
So I think like that's sometimes interesting to me, is like someone may have a pretty good grasp of, well, I know what I spend every month, which, don't get me wrong, that's very helpful.
Sure.
That's a
big first step.
That's a big first step. So if I have someone that says, well, I don't know anything, but they do have a good handle on what the monthly expenses are, I try to say to them, actually, you know more than you think you do, because if you just know what what the credit cards are, you know what the joint bank account, you may not understand everything coming in. No one understands taxes,
right,
like your professionals do. And certainly no one expects you to understand that. But that's helpful. I think the ones that sometimes I just kind of go, okay, there's a lot of work to do here, is I have a credit card and I can charge things and the bill gets paid and I don't know how.
That's
so
wild.
What percentage of couples coming to you are kind of surprised about what they learn once they kind of unveil their spending, their taxes, their monies, or are all of a sudden aware of some extra additional expenditures or debts or things like that? What percentage really are shocked by what they're seeing for this very first time before you?
Shocked, I'm not sure, but I would say probably 90% of couples.
Wow.
I have someone say I learned something about my spending. And sometimes they're very high earners and they'll say, I didn't realize I was paying Comcast this extra whatever, or I just realized I've been paying for I did have one client who was like, I did not realize that I was paying for my adult 40-year-old cell phone bill, because, it was just like,
they're still on the plan.
They're just still on the plan. But when they have to go through the exercise, which is often mind numbing,
yes,
and they hate going through the expenses, they're like, I learned something. Because quite honestly, we don't, as human beings, have the time to look at all of this as deeply as, unfortunately, you have to look at when you're going through a divorce. So we do have to go through that kind of exercise of income, expenses, and assets, and really learning them so we can do things like set support.
Yeah.
Divide the property. But most people learn something, and it's not all bad. It's not all like, oh my gosh, we have a tax lien on the home. Sometimes it's, I forgot I had this life insurance policy, and oh my gosh, there's an extra $50,000 of cash value. And you know what? We don't really need that anymore. So we're going to cash that out and pay for college.
There you go.
Sometimes there's good
things
that you can find, or, remember that UTMA account we set up for the kids? Interest rates have not been great the last several years, but sometimes, they'll be good findings, oh, hey, this is,
a
good thing.
Yeah. That's always a good day, right?
Yeah, I always say more money in a divorce case is not a bad thing.
That's right.
That's like, there's whenever you can find more money, there's usually debt that needs to be paid, that, more money is usually a good thing for the balance sheet.
Yeah.
So if women are listening to this and, they're not going through divorce, but they've been, in their relationship, not really partaking in these conversations for whatever reason, what recommendations do you have, either where to get started or how to get started, and what they should really focus on?
So what I tell people, that I'm talking with, that ask for advice, that, there a lot of times people say, my marriage is fine. I'm fine. And I'll say, I think like do a litmus test with yourself. And if something happened to your husband tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
do you know who to call? And I mean like, do you know who the life insurance agent
Mm-hmm.
is? Do you know who the CPA is? Do you know who the financial planner is? Just start there and find out who are the 3 or 4 people. And there may be one person. Sometimes people have like their financial planner has the contact information for everyone, or the financial planner actually is running all of the investments and the life insurance and has conversations regularly with the accountant. But I always say, start there. Do you even know who it is? And sometimes if you're at a bigger institution, they can turn over people.
Yes, that's true.
And so if you don't have a dedicated person, or you didn't sign up with a dedicated person, if you do have a dedicated person, have they moved? Have they switched from one entity to another? Because we know there's been a lot of rejiggering, especially in these pandemic years, where people are moving. So make sure you know where the contact information is. The second thing is, a lot of times people have a place where they keep paperwork. Do you know where that is? Don't just like when someone says like, I'm putting this here, pay attention, and then do you know where your estate planning documents are? Do you know who your estate planning attorney is?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who those important people are? I think that's the place to start. And if you're just planning for something terrible and unexpected, but if you know that, the next step is, do you know where do you have an inventory of all of your assets? I think that's really important, because it's never all in one place. And I can really honestly say never. It would be highly unusual, because financial planners and investment advisors don't really have documents pertaining to your home.
True.
A lot of times they have the home listed with, maybe some estimations of value, but they probably don't have your mortgage documents. They probably don't have your tax, your like property tax information. So I think like first steps is just kind of get involved and just maybe start. Or this is not fun stuff. This is, what I always tell people, this goes on the list of like to do when there's literally nothing else to do, right? Like no one wants, this is not like, oh, this is a fun Saturday night activity. This isn't even a good Sunday afternoon activity. But I always say, just break it off in small pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you start learning about this stuff, that I think a lot of women think is not accessible. And here's the thing that, no one really says. A lot of men aren't great at this.
True.
But there's some stereotype out there that they're better at it. And women accept that. Just start asking questions. And that does not mean that you don't trust your spouse. It shows that you're involved. It shows that you want to know. And you know what? Like, worst case scenario, if something happens to him, you have to know. You have to know where to go. You cannot, especially if you have children.
Right.
Especially if you have children. This is your insurance policy for them. Make sure mom knows what's in the will. A lot of times estate planning attorneys will do living trusts. With mirroring provisions, and each spouse is the trustee for the other spouse.
Right.
Just start asking, what does that mean? And I think women have a hard time asking because they don't, and I know you guys talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Women don't want to ask because they don't want to seem stupid, and they don't want people to kind of be like, oh God, now I've got to explain this to her.
Right.
How does she not know this? Well, first of all, any professional advisor that makes you feel that way should not be your professional advisor.
Amen.
Because if you are married and you have an advisor, they need to be including you in on conversations. And no advisor should be, and if they are, they should not be your advisor. If you ask a question in your meeting, they need to answer it as if your husband asked that question.
Yeah,
right.
And
exactly.
and even if it is something as simple as how much do we save a month? That's a perfectly legitimate question.
That's
how
what you're
much
paying
should
them
we
for.
be? Yes. And I think sometimes, and I say this because, look, I came to divorce law. I didn't have an MBA. I didn't have a, CFP. And I learned all of this over time. Things start to click and make sense after you have like a certain level of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And you only get to that point if you ask questions.
Absolutely.
To form that baseline knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I had wonderful mentors that when I was learning the tax code, it was just like, my first couple of years, it was probably painful. I'm guessing people were probably like, God, how does she not know this? But you have to ask those questions in order to understand. And we as women also need to pay that forward to other women. Mm-hmm. So, and I try to do that. Like, look, I know some of these are hard concepts, and I don't expect you to walk out of here being a tax expert. I just got to get you to understand enough so you can make a decision for yourself if that's an issue. You are always going to have advisors in your life that, that is their job. Ongoing is to tell you what the best tax ramifications are, the best retirement plan. You just have to know enough to be able to ask the right questions.
Right. And you have to be partnering with the right advisors, attorneys, lenders, whomever's on your financial team that can all kind of rally around you and support you where you are and how to move forward. So, yeah, Maggie, wouldn't you agree? We have these conversations a lot, and we shout out a lot about just the foundations, right? Know where the money is, have a location, whether it's a shoebox, whether it's a, fireproof file cabinet. This is where all of our documents go as we start acquiring, life insurance and, wills and POAs and things like that.
And I think passwords are critical, especially now. I am sometimes surprised at stereotypically women clients who I will say something like, well, do you have the password? Well, I think he gave it to me a while ago. Like if you're being given a password to an account, or someone is trying to give you a password, there's many reasons for that. But just consider a password today is 30 years ago, it was your ability to open up an envelope.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's your, like I said, if your spouse gets hit by a bus tomorrow, God forbid, that's a horrible situation, but it does happen. If you have passwords to everything, you are light years ahead. You are light years ahead because that is instant access.
Right.
Instant access. And, today with all the password managers out there, I'm certainly not advocating that anyone has like an index card, under their
everything's online. It's
drawer.
very easy. Yeah.
But just know how to access. Because if you have access, that's 90% of the ball game. Because if you have access to it, there's probably an advisor's name.
Exactly.
Not next to it. And if you have access to it, you probably have access to all of your tax forms that institution is generating. So sometimes, I think it's very easy to say, well, I will get to that tomorrow. Just make sure tomorrow isn't the infinity tomorrow.
Right.
Make sure it's a designated time. And, and if something horrible does happen, as in the event of divorce, having that access is second to none, a gold mine.
Yeah,
because
right.
you now are not, even if you don't know what it means, but you have access to it, you can provide it to your attorney, your professionals, and they can tell you what they're seeing in it. But if you don't have access, then you have to go through the routine that I was talking about at the beginning, which is, could we call the accountant? Could we call the investment advisor? Oh gosh, now do we need to issue a subpoena? You don't have to do any of that if you yourself have hands-on information. And you can really save yourself a lot of time and money.
Right.
Awesome. That's great. A lot of great information. And as we like to remind everyone, nothing happens overnight. It's not an all-day event. It takes time, but it's just getting started and making a little progress every single time.
Right.
Are there any last words or pieces of advice you want to give our community of women today before we wrap this podcast up?
No, I think what you guys are doing for women, is great. We all, as women, just need to support women, and we need to just, kind of keep pounding that drumbeat of education. And Maggie, I do like what you just said about how it doesn't happen, overnight. I think sometimes this is such an overwhelming field. Mm-hmm. That if people do jump in too quickly, sometimes it's like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. I'm just, just bite off a little chunk and just say like, hey, maybe this week I'm going to figure out like, where do our mortgage statements go?
Right.
And maybe download 6 months of them and save them online somewhere, and just get in a habit of when stuff comes in, don't leave it in your email, download it, just be like a keeper of information for yourself. That's a great thing to do. Even you don't have to understand it. And a lot of people don't understand their entire investment statement. Like that's the other thing, a lot of people understand the first 2 pages of it and they need someone else. So you don't feel like you need to like literally dive in and understand every trade and every little gain that's reported on every statement.
That's why you pay your experts, like Maggie said.
Right.
That's what you pay them for, right? And so it's just a matter of being in the know on a regular and ongoing basis. I even say open a little spreadsheet or a little chart that just has the name of the account and the account number and where they can find the password. You don't necessarily want to put the password on there, but if you have some kind of application that has all of your passwords logged in, where can you find the password? And then names of people, right? Even if you put it all on one sheet, just kind of an inventory, it's a good place to start. So keep it simple, keep it accessible, keep it in a way that makes sense for you. So this has been great. And we know divorce is tough, but not only divorce, if you become widowed, if you're just living on your own, you just need to know about your finances, about your cash flow, money in and out, the way money flows, your investments. You need to have a central location of where you're putting your important documents should anything happen. So these are all great tips, Michelle. We can't thank you enough. You're always such a great, vast knowledge holder anytime we reach out and ask you. So we appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We'll talk to everyone soon. Bye.
Bye, all.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.